People's Tribunal on Economic Crime in South Africa will open its first hearings tomorrow at Constitution Hill in Johannesburg. People's Tribunals have been led by citizens and civil society for over 4 decades to address human rights abuses and war crimes in many contexts, including Palestine and Indonesia. The South African People's Tribunal on Economic Crime will be the first tribunal of its kind to focus primarily on economic crimes and corruption. To talk to us more about this, we're joined by Alfred Tshabalala, who is the organiser of the tribunal. Alfred, thanks for coming and welcome to Morning Live.
Hi, thanks very much.
All right, so economic crimes, I suppose it'll be a good starting point. What falls underneath this?
Well, economic crimes is referring to those crimes that have got this economic impact. It could be because it was done under the guise of the state, or when it's done by the banks to banks. In South Africa, for instance, we're talking currently about your state capture situation. Here we are talking about the economic situation wherein crime was committed under the guise of performing the state duties. And also, during the apartheid times, we had a situation where we had sanctions, for instance. But you find that many banks were still trading. They were still making money. They were still relating to the outside world on behalf of the South African state. So you have arms deals, which were continuing as well. People there were just, when the international community said we are imposing sanctions, we are not allowing any trade in South Africa, but there were situations which were going on because people wanted to benefit under those conditions.
And it certainly is. I mean, when we talk about these crimes, and it's quite interesting when I see, how you describe it here, crimes of the rich, powerful and politically well-connected in South Africa, basically, in a nutshell, coming under scrutiny. Open Secrets, Corruption Watch, Right to Know and the Public Affairs Research Institute are all behind this. Why did you decide at this time? Was it brought about by the whole state capture inquiry and what's been happening in the environment in South Africa that necessitated this?
Well, all over the world, when something of this nature happens, there's a time when the civil society sit down and look at the way in which the communities have been able to interface with this process. Because there has to be a well-informed debate at the community level, the whole entire society. You see what is going on now. You find that your ESCOM people are taken through commissions and all these things. It's all at a higher level there. So people on the ground were also affected. So you are saying to the civil society and communities, come, let's hear what you have, how much do you have evidence in terms of what has been affecting your side, so that the South African environment is well informed, so that we start to talk about these issues, so that where there's a need perhaps to look at issues, we are able to revisit them and take them to the proper processes as the civil society.
Yeah, it's quite difficult because when you think about it, as you mentioned, you see all the big ESCOM heads going and sitting before these different inquiries and answering questions. And at the end of the day, the normal, ordinary South African, such as you and I, have been paying increased fees all along. We are being punished. We've been sitting in darkness. We haven't had electricity. And we've been paying more for the electricity that we don't get, all because of these crimes that you're talking about right now. So it's the average South African that suffers at the end of the day.
Of course, it's true. If you remember, there's a case going on now in Limpopo where the child had to sink over the toilet. And that school has been looking for that toilet. The Department of Education certainly had some form of doing that. But because of the corruption that is taking place, those toilets were not built in. So now you had a human loss. So now you see those cases, these are the characters that you have to establish and you have to really expose so that the public is aware of that and they are able to interface. The government has got a mandate. They have to follow what is accordingly right into the book. You cannot allow then, therefore, that the corruption goes on like that as a civil society, because if we don't act as a civil society, then really we are going to live out of those situations where corruption is the order of the day.
I see that in a nutshell, to describe this tribunal. I'm just going to quote Yasmin Suka, who's the Executive Director for the Foundation of Human Rights and the adjudicator of this tribunal, saying its primary purpose is to expose truth and to deepen public understanding of how and where capture, corruption and pillage began, specifically the continuities between the past and the present. So this is almost kind of like a TRC in a way, isn't it?
Of course, yes. If you remember that is a quite good example, because there in the TRC people were able to relate. You have adjudicators sitting down there, you've got people presenting their evidence on how were they affected about these issues. There are many kind of things that they could have experienced as the people on the ground. Remember, here we are dealing with the situations, we are dealing basically with three themes which will well cover all the situations. Yeah. We are looking during the time of apartheid, between 1977 and 1994. We are looking at the state capture in 1999. We are looking at in 1999 in particular, we are looking at the arms deal. You remember the Seriti Commission, wherein the arms deal was going on. And then that arms deal was going on under the very wrong kind of a situation. The government there was committing a serious corruption, but the public is unable to relate to that. The tax money that has gone to that, it could have done a lot of other things. So here in South Africa, our public, once they are aware, they are able then to challenge these things. That is the reason why this is like letting people to know and to actually attend to those situations which are not currently being in the public terrain.
Well, this is so interesting. Is it, I suppose the question, are people allowed to just arrive at these hearings at the tribunal? Can they come through? Is it open to the public?
We're expecting the civil society, the whole community to come.
Everybody come through.
Everybody is welcome to come.
It's happening from the 3rd, that's tomorrow,
until the 7th.
Until the 7th of February.
Until the 7th of February.
Okay.
Then there will be every morning session. The civil society organization will be presenting their matters, and then that will be taken into consideration. And then during the day, there will be sessions in which there will be some form of workshops wherein correctly the issues will be taken through and be workshopped around.
All right, we leave it there for this morning. Thank you. We'll be talking to you throughout it, I hope, and finding some of those things that will be coming out. Alfred Tshabalala, one of the organizers of the People's Tribunal on Economic Crime. This tribunal held, it's starting tomorrow. It'll be at Constitution Hill from the 3rd to the 7th of February. Basically just ending off this interview saying, a sluggish attitude from government on prosecution has given birth to a need for a people's tribunal in which ordinary South Africans offer the country a glimpse into a model of how economic crimes can be dealt with, or at least offer inspiration to the government to pursue economic crime. That is from the Tribunal's Right to Access Information organizer. All right, let us take a break. We will be going back to Palesa, who is at the taxi rank after this. I think it's the